Okay. So in single subject research and design, it is still quantitative data. I want you to understand the difference between this and repeated measures because it's another type of quantitative data that's similar to repeated measures, but single subject is going to be different in some ways. I want you to be able to interpret the charts that detail the results of single subject design. So here's the article that you're going to be reading for homework this week. And here's one of the examples here. In a single subject design, we're doing an experiment, but we're just doing it with one person, okay, or maybe a couple people. But it's going to be just really focused on one person. And you're saying, what do I want to change? So the dependent variable here, or the target behavior, is aggressive behavior. So we have Johnny, who's 13 years old, who's very aggressive, and we want to reduce his aggressive behavior. So in this experiment, we're first going to collect some baseline data. And who's going to collect that? The staff members. And what they're going to do is every 5 minutes, they're going to collect data about what's happening with Johnny in those 5 minutes. Is being aggressive or not? They're going to do this for 3 days. Okay. Then they're going to have an intervention plan. This intervention plan seems to be very complex. So they're going to do all these things. This is the intervention plan. Okay. So, and then they're going to collect data during this intervention time when all of these things are happening to Johnny when he is aggressive. The staff members are going to still collect data about how aggressive he is every 5 minutes over a school day, collected monthly for 8 months. So one school day, once a month, so 8 different times. And we're going to see whether this intervention plan is working on his aggressive behavior. So now we go ahead and start the experiment. We start by collecting the baseline data, see how aggressive he is. We start this plan, and then we're going to do the count over 8 months and see what happens. So here's what we have. And on these charts, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see a frequency, how frequent is the behavior happening. Then you'll see a trend that's going to go up or down, and a slope. This is the steepness, or how strong it goes up or down. So here we have the baseline before any intervention, and we have these 4 times that they collected data, and you see how much disruptive behavior he is showing. So here we go, right up here, over 100. And you can see that it is escalating here. Then we have phase 2. And you can see what's happening. We have this intervention. Then we have phase 3. And then phase 4. So you can see once a month, every 8 months, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This looks like more than 8 months. So what's the story? What's happening here with that data? The intervention plan. Do you think it's working? So let me send you to your breakout rooms. What do you think? Is it working? Yes or no? Or let's just do it in the chat, okay? Just put in the chat, do you think this intervention is working? Okay, we're pretty much all agreeing that yes, you can see, look at, but baseline before the intervention, he is being aggressive like 100 and over 100 times a day. And then it goes down during this intervention, he's down to 0. So obviously, everyone's saying yes, but it's obvious if you know how to read this chart that it went down from over 100 to 0 with this intervention plan. So we can say that this intervention plan is working. Let's look at another example. This is called an ABA design because they're going to do a baseline of 5 sessions and then an intervention of 7 sessions and then go back to baseline for 4 sessions without the intervention to see if it'll keep up. Okay, so, and then they're going to do B, another 4 sessions, and then maintenance of 2 sessions where they're not going to do the intervention. So the target behavior for Thomas is that he's going to sit because he's having trouble sitting in preschool. And the intervention is this social stories where he's going to tell them stories about, children who need to sit and doing sitting. And it's a story, but he's learning about the target behavior in these stories. So what's the independent variable here? Is it sitting or social stories? What do you think? Put in the chat. What's the independent variable? Okay, we seem to be all agreeing that it's social stories. Yes, this is the thing that we're manipulating, is the social stories. Sitting is the target behavior or the dependent variable, the thing we're trying to change. Social stories is the thing that we're doing to try to change that behavior. And this is a single subject research because we're just doing this with Thomas. If we had like 4 students that were having trouble sitting, we could have 4 students in this. It doesn't have to just be one person, but it's not going to be whole groups with large sample sizes. So let's see what happens when we have a baseline. Then we do social stories for 7 sessions and then go back to baseline and then intervention and then maintenance. So look what happened. Here's baseline, social story, then the baseline, what happened, then social story, and then they took away the social stories and maintenance. So look at this and think about what happened. And then I'm going to send you off to your breakout room so you can talk about it for a minute. But look at it first, because then you might not be able to see this when you go out to your breakout rooms.
Sorry, I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. Alex, can you tell us what your group was talking about? What's the story here?
So the intervention seemed to help, but then he reverted back to baseline after the first round of intervention. But then after a second round of intervention, it seemed to stick with him.
Okay, good. That makes sense. And so you see how data does tell a story, and it's a matter for you to look at the data and interpret it and tell, what does this story say? Now, the researcher will do the same thing. So then it's a matter of you looking at what did the researcher say, and is it similar to what you think? So that's right. That's the kind of thinking that you would do. Now, does anyone have anything I think you're pretty straightforward, Alex, with what happened there. Does anyone have anything to add that Alex didn't talk about?
I'm not sure what Alex talked about, but I'm actually trained in ABA, so I would like to have input. But what did Alex say? I'm sorry, we were still talking.
Oh, that's okay. Sorry. Yeah. So he said that it looks like it didn't stick the first time. So after the second baseline showed that it really didn't stick. So then they did the second one, and then it seemed to stick. So what do you think, Sam?
Well, I was saying, and Allison was agreeing with me because she's had similar training, that actually, I hate to say it, this is really shoddy behavior. There's also not enough information for it to even tell an appropriate story. Because if we went back to baseline at phase A, the second phase A, and it was so low, I would expect to see that the second phase B would have actually been C. I would have expected to see that the intervention would have actually changed. But it doesn't look like it did. I'm not sure. Because if they would have changed the social story, it would have appropriately been like a C, but it doesn't. I don't know. There's just not enough information. But I'm also reading into it like a lot because I am trained in ABA. But to me, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And I don't know what criteria they considered to be mastery or not. Like what they were looking for in terms of duration length. Like what did they consider to be mastery for them to go into maintenance? So
okay, that's good information because this is the study you're going to read. So I'm just showing you the results, the findings, but you'll be able to go into the details in the study. So you'll answer. I'm glad you're asking some of these questions so that others can hear about the questions you're asking, because there is another one that's coming up that's going to be ABAC. So there is going to be an example of what you're talking about. For this one, they didn't do that though. But so I appreciate you giving me your feedback, because that's going to help the rest of them when they read this, ask those kind of questions when they're looking to see whether it was a valid study and whether it's a valuable information. So Allison, did you have anything additional to add?
Not anything too specific. I think just an observation, I guess, or reflection, like I think it's going to be interesting because we do have a lot of folks coming from different backgrounds with different trainings. So
Uh-huh.
get something that's more like in line with your field of study, you kind of, or at least like myself, I pay a little bit more attention because I'm like, oh, okay, so if this was my client, like what would I make of this data? And are there other factors? Like one of the things we talked about in our group was like, is the teacher consistent in this setting? Like, what environment is this individual in? And what other factors or environmental factors are kind of contributing to this like individual. So I think single study is always, or like, I don't remember what I called it in grad school, but like um, just studies on one singular person or case studies are always interesting because you're looking really at one single person and how something applies to them, and can we generalize it to a number of people from that.
True,
So
true. And you're
just a
bringing
lot of
up,
questions, I guess.
yeah, and you're bringing up a really good point. No matter what study we read, if you're really into, if you are an expert or is your area, when you read a study, you are going to be able to interpret that study at a much deeper level than someone who is coming in and this is foreign to them. And so that's the way it is with any studies. And so hopefully, over the course of the semester, everyone will feel comfortable with some of the studies. And that's why in the midterm, I let you choose your own study because it does make a difference of what your background is, whether or not you can understand studies at a certain level. So thank you, Sam and Ellison, for sharing that with us. So here is, look at this one. This is the ABC, ACBC design. And we have Daniel, and his target behavior is talking to his peers. So they are using social stories, that's B. And then you'll notice this, what you mentioned, Sam, is they added prompts. So social stories plus prompts as a C. So we can maybe guess, like you were mentioning before, if B alone wasn't working so well, they did something else. So notice here they did a baseline of 5 sessions, then they did intervention with social stories, and then they added social stories and prompts for 6 sessions. Then they went to back to baseline. Then they did social stories with prompts. Then they took the prompts away. Then they put the prompts back before they went to maintenance. Okay, so let's look at here. What's the dependent variable here? Would you just put in the chat, what's the dependent variable? Okay, so you can, yeah, it's this talking to peers. The target behavior is the dependent variable, the thing we're trying to change. And this is what we're doing to try to change the behavior. Social stories and then social stories with prompts. So now let's look and see what happened with Daniel. So here we have the baseline, we have social stories. What do you think happened there? Then they added prompts, see what happened there. Then they went back to baseline. Look what happened there. And then they did social stories with prompts. Now look at that. And then just social stories again. And then social stories with prompts and then maintenance. So sending you off to talk about this now. What do you think is happening with this little guy? Okay, so here we have a whole nother story. Peyton, what were you and Everett talking about?
Sorry, everyone.
We just noticed it seemed like the stories by themselves were not doing too much to help this participant. And then once they added prompting, it looks like it was very effective for him. So he just might need a bit more prompting before he's ready to do anything on his own.
Okay. All right. That's a good start. Thanks, Peyton. Let's see, Leah, can you add to that?
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, it's obviously he's not really talking to peers a lot, and the social stories don't help too much. The social stories with prompts do help, but when they're not being used, he kind of reverts back to like the baseline level. And even when they introduced the prompts again and then went back to just the social stories, he still went right back down to not talking to his peers as much. And I don't know, it seemed like this type of intervention didn't really work amazingly. I mean, yes, by the end during or at the maintenance period, he's not at 0, but like, I don't know. It didn't seem like it was a super effective intervention.
Okay, good, good. What do you think, which thing do you think worked better, the social stories or the prompt?
The prompts.
Yeah, I'm kind of, as you were talking, I'm kind of thinking, what if they just use prompts and not social stories?
Yeah.
Maybe we should do a D in here. All right, thanks, Leah. All right, so let's hear from Pleasure. What did you think? Is Pleasure with us? Hello? All right, how about Jody Lynn? What was your group talking about?
Hi. So we were kind of working through, and Sam was just helping me with everything just because that's what her training is in specifically.
Uh-huh.
Um, and we were looking at like the baseline, our social story and prompts, the next baseline, and then the maintenance.
Mhm.
And while he's not at 0, there is an incline there, and does seem to be a higher frequency for him talking to his peers, which Sam was saying could be predictive that he would continue to grow over time, in his ability to talk to his peers.
Okay, that makes sense because he's going up. I mean, they just counted 2 times, but if they came
Mhm.
back and, looked at maintenance again in the next, few weeks and see if he's keeping it up. Good. All right,
Yeah.
Sam and Allison, do you want to add anything else since this is your area here?
I mean, I guess like I heard you earlier about like potentially doing like a phase D and have it just be prompting. Um, that would be like, oh man, no, I'm getting into like behaviorism. This is so much fun. I love when I get to talk about this stuff. Um, so prompting is actually less of an intensive strategy than social stories. Social stories is actually more of an intensive strategy, right? Because you're actually pulling the kiddo away to read them the story prior to the situation actually happening.
Yeah.
So actually the phase C that's going on with social stories and prompts is more of an intensive intervention than like B, where it's just social stories. Eventually,
Mhm.
you would like to get it to just prompting, which would be like less of an intervention than like the other two.
Yeah.
I mean, I was potentially thinking it could be the frequency could go up if like time allowed it, but time would like need to be like kind of fast, right? Because you'd want to like catch whatever this issue is like pretty quickly. I think
Mhm.
that he could probably be again like the data still is like a little shoddy. You'd like
Mhm.
to see like the kiddo hit 80% or whatever your mastery criteria is like over the course
Yeah.
of maybe 3 or 4 sessions. They really
Yeah.
only did
Yeah.
2.
Right, right.
So like if they extended phase C, I betcha like maintenance would be looking better, but that's just kind of like my thinking. It is going
Yeah.
up, but I think if they extended like the phase C sessions, like that would be really nice because then you probably could generalize and decrease and go to B and then potentially D, which could just be prompting, or maybe you won't even need prompting. That would be
Yeah.
nice, right?
Wouldn't it? Wouldn't it? It would be nice. Well, and
Mhm.
you keep talking about generalizing. So this is a really good point here about generalizing. And in this case with single subject research, it's generalizing means something different because we're not looking at statistically significant results because we only have one subject here. We can't run an inferential statistic test, no chi-square, no t-test, nothing. So this is a different kind of generalizing. This is more of an application where we're saying this applies to other students. So I look at this information and I have a little guy who doesn't talk and I want to encourage him to talk in my class, I might look at this data and say, oh, I'm going to try the social stories with prompting. Or do you see how I can generalize to my own situation, but I'm not going to generalize and say this works with all autistic kids, because I think this whole study is on children with autism, these different interventions. So we can't make a big generalization with single subject, but we can do this kind of quasi generalization and say it can be applied. Or when we talk about qualitative research, we can say we can transfer this information to another situation without making a generalization. So I hope that kind of helps you see that. So what you're going to do this week is in week 5 here, there is the study. What you just saw is some of the results of the study that you're going to read. So now hopefully, because you saw the results and we talked about it, you'll be interested to read the rest of the article and maybe asking yourself some of those questions that Sam and Allison kind of posed for us. So you're going to open it up. Here's the study. It's called ABA Reversal Design with children who are on the autism spectrum. Okay, so I think it's a really interesting study. So what you're going to do is go through, read the study, highlight what you think is important, put notes along the side, and then I want you to write, you have a choice of 3 things here. You can either write a traditional article analysis, including all these things, include the link to your notes, name of the article, research design, all the things like you did last week. Or if you want to, you could write a news story about the study. I want you to be creative. However, you still have to include all of this information in your news story somehow. So you really have to be creative with it, okay? Or you can write an email. Let's say you have someone you know who is on the spectrum, and maybe one of these things applies to him or her or their child or their student, and you can write an email. But again, you have to include all these things. What I'm trying to do is to get you to that next level to say, not only here's what the story is, this is what it means, but how can it be applied to others? Who cares about it? How can we take it to the next level? That's why I'm giving you the choice. So a traditional article, but in your article analysis, make sure that you make the case for who this would be important to, who this would be valuable for. And then, or you could write a news story or an email. Now, what questions do you have about this assignment? Any?
Wait, I have a question too.
Sure. Go ahead.
Like I out of the 3, like I think I'd be interested in doing the email version of that. The only thing I guess I wanted to ask is, do you want us to it's like kind of make up a person of maybe like a teacher or something that works with children with autism type of thing?
Yes.
And
yes.
then would I like just kind of write including like each of one of these things? So like, oh, the research design is like the AB design and like
yeah.
that.
And then
So
whether you think was this a valid study, like
okay.
what you think.
So that's more like so once I go through I guess because when I did the assignment, last week's assignment, I read over your feedback. For me, I think mine was a little bit hard to follow and a little bit like there were some questions you had, like I wasn't clear or I didn't have enough detail about things that I was kind of just like mentioning them and not going into detail about it. So here, with the little stars, you want us to kind of go into whether we would find that reliable or valid and things
yes put your own thinking in there. That's why I'm saying if you write an email, you're more likely to talk about it with your own voice and not just like list the details. You know what I mean? So that's why I'm encouraging you to maybe try something new. I want to hear your voice. I want to hear you understanding this study and being able to apply it, because that's what this course is all about. So yes, I want you to show me that you know how to interpret the statistics, because that's like the first step. But I want you to take it to the next step and say, what does it mean? Like, why do we care about this study? Why is it valuable? Does that
Okay.
make sense?
It does. I mean, I personally feel like I'm still having a little trouble of like making you know how we just went over in the beginning of the class, kind of like talking about the male and female, and if we would think it would be valid, and if we think it
Yeah.
would be. So I know that you're not like grading this on correctness, but like I guess if I had questions about that, could I email you? Because I have a hard time personally just.
Yes, and it's okay because sometimes when I give you feedback, it's not necessarily saying you're wrong. It's more feedback saying consider this as well.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Not so much. I don't mean to say wrong. You have to think like me, but
No,
did
no,
you
yeah.
consider this?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
And the other thing that I just want to mention before we go is I did find Jen Leah's thing and I put it on here. So I just want to end with this because thinking about what Leah said at the end of her article last week is, do you see how notice how she is really articulating what this means? She says, I think these results mean the most for universities that want to encourage better eating in college students on their campus. It's evident from this research that college students at this university do not feel as motivated to eat and prepare healthy foods as much as they value that they should. It would be helpful to see what universities can do with the information, such as this, in ways of making healthy snacks more accessible and affordable for college students already dealing with so much change in their lives. I also like the suggestion in the article to offer food demonstrations, cooking clubs, or cooking classes to promote student healthy eating habits. I think this article does a good job of summarizing the implications of the research and offering actionable solutions to encourage the health of young college students. So this is a perfect example of how this is Leah's thoughts. This wasn't in the study. She took it to the next level. And that's what I'm looking for in your article analysis for next week. Whether you write a traditional analysis, a news story, or an email, I'm looking for this type of thing that shows me first, you know, the details and you can correctly tell me the details, but then bring it to the next level and say, what does this mean? I hope that's helpful for you to make it clear what I'm expecting. And then the other thing that you'll have, there is a quiz on single subject and non-experimental. And remember that you can take it a second time. If you miss something, you can take it a second time and get them right. Next week, we're going to be starting with ANOVA's factorial designs, and we're going to spend 2 or 3 weeks on this because this is what is most common and also most confusing for some students. So we're going to break it down. So you're going to read chapter 9, start to read it. And there's week 6 presentations you'll watch before. There's 2 presentations, one on t-test experimental designs and one factorial designs part 1. So you watch those and we'll start to really pull this apart next week. Okay. So if you have some specific questions that you want to discuss with me, then hang out with me. Otherwise, have a wonderful week and I'll see you next Wednesday.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Hi, Professor. Oh, go ahead.